Everybody. It's so welcome. Of course, it's 4:02, so I'm sure people are still arriving. And I'm super happy that even though Sadia normally lives in Bombay, she happens to be in Goa, and we can actually sit next to each other for this conversation, which is really a privilege. And I really want to thank Sadia for making the time to join us at Sisters in Spirit. And while I have sent Sadia's bio before, as it's customary, and it's my honor to introduce Sadia to all of you, so I'm going to do that by reading excerpts from Sadia's bio. So before I launch into that, I want to say that when I kind of began my spiritual journey more seriously, the first place I went to was a place called Deer Park Institute for Indian Wisdom, Traditions and Non-Duality, which is in Himachal Pradesh in Bir. And it's a very exciting center. Ooh, I think I have to, sorry. Nivita, can you mute participants? I think I have some feedback. Sai, I think we have to mute you. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So I went to the Deer Park Institute, and I really consider it my spiritual home. It's a very progressive place because the Rinpoche, or the Lama who heads this institute, is quite a maverick. He's a filmmaker. He's very avant-garde. He comes cross-dressed for teachings, and he's says very outrageous things and does very outrageous things. His name is Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, for some of you who may know him or are wondering who I'm talking about. And I happened to meet Sadia there many years ago, and I distinctively remember that meeting very well. And I also remember her saying that she was a psychologist and a counselor. And I think Sadia was on a personal retreat and quite quiet. But subsequently to that, so it's just a karmic connection. We also have somehow a group and an important person that ties us together. There is an NGO in Bombay called Kranti, which is led by a very dynamic young woman called Robin Chaurasia. It's an NGO that works for daughters of sex workers, daughters from red light areas, and it has done very groundbreaking work. And Sadia has also been the official counselor and psychotherapist for many of the individuals who are part of this NGO, but also, let's say, for the NGO as a collective. She's been working with them for more than 8 years. So I'm very pleased and honored to introduce Sadia, who's a founder and chief psychologist at Inner Space in Bombay. And it's a mental health center that provides online and offline counseling and psychotherapy, mindfulness-based programs for groups, and trainings for not-for-profit and corporate organizations. So in the capacity of a psychologist, Sadia has worked extensively with many different populations for 20 years, including individuals, couples, children, special populations such as juveniles suffering from diabetes or HIV-positive orphans, children of sex workers, and she has also worked in regular and special schools as a counselor. She also volunteered with the Borderless World Foundation, which is an NGO which worked with orphan children in Kashmir. So Sadia graduated in psychology from St. Xavier's, Mumbai, and did her master's in clinical psychology also from Bombay University. And of course, over the years, she has attended numerous workshops to further her understanding and help her clients, some of which we are going to also discuss today, specifically her experience with integral somatic psychotherapy, and also mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, And she also worked with Rick Hansen, attended trainings with Rick Hansen, looking at the neuroscience to understand mindfulness and the effects of mindfulness and contemplative practice on the human psyche. So I am once again super thrilled and delighted. And the way we want to carry forward today's session is that I have prepared 3 very simple and basic questions for Sadia. I'm going to ask those questions, Sadia will answer. And after each question, all of you have the opportunity to also ask questions for the clarifications or so we want this to be more in the form of a discussion where the question I ask is just, taking us deeper into a conversation, all of us together. And then towards the end of the session, Sadia will lead us in a somatic practice. And of course, the questions that I have prepared, while they're simple, they've been keeping in mind the needs of our community. So, but there is ample of space for all of you to also ask specific things. Thank you. So, Sadia, my first question to you is that could you please speak a little bit more about your journey and work as a counselor and psychotherapist? Because it seems that at some point in your professional career, you turned yourself towards Eastern traditions, various Eastern traditions, and specifically the contemplative and mindfulness aspects of these traditions, and also the psychology that these traditions are presenting. So what was that pivotal point that, made you shift from one way of, being a counselor and psychotherapist in the world to another? And then there's a very famous book by a Tibetan Lama, Lama Yeshe, called Becoming Your Own Therapist, which I find very compelling and beautiful. And I really connect very deeply to his teachings. So I want to know that this turning to the Eastern traditions, how does that empower your work or influence your work in this attitude of making people their own therapists, giving them the tools to become their own therapists? And also specifically, if you can speak about how your study of somatics and neuroscience, somatics, neuroscience, and meditation influences your work and your approach. And if you can please illustrate as much as possible with case studies. Yeah, so it's a mouthful of a question.
Well, let's stop.
Sorry. Okay, I stop now. Thank you.
Okay, am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Yeah, that was really a handful. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to be with all. I'm going to try to answer that question to the best of my capacity. I have been trained, we are good? Yeah. I have been trained as, typically gone through the psychotherapy, psychology training. I did it at undergrad level. I did it as a postgrad level. So for me, I fell in love with psychology when I started studying it, and there was no looking back. I almost knew I was to become a therapist. So it was absolutely love at first sight with psychology. And so the training had been with Western psychology, which I have to say has been very, very useful in establishing context of how the thought process works, how can you influence the thought process, how can you help understand the rationality behind the thought process, and so on. So this itself was extremely useful. Practicing this was very helpful for a few years. But then what started happening is, as I became let's say a better therapist, or as I started becoming a more a therapist who could go deeper, I felt that there was a kind of a block or a stagnation or something that we couldn't kind of cross in therapy. And that happened even in my personal life. So knowing that you're not thinking super rationally is helpful. Knowing that you need not be jealous about a situation, but you're feeling jealous, and it's okay to feel jealous. But what do you do? What do you do now that you understand patterns, now that you understand behavior, now that you understand this is happening and that this is not sensible and it's happening almost mindlessly, what do you do? So that's where I felt that the Western models of therapy were not being able to answer things after that. While it was about setting context, trying to understand patterns, they were very useful. But then when it came to, in this moment, I am feeling in a certain way right now, what do I do? It wasn't helping the clients after that point. It wasn't helping me after that point, because, you know, you're very punitive to yourself as a therapist, especially when you don't have any other spiritual practice. You're like, you know everything. Why are you going through this? So the self-doubt and the self-questioning is immense in the process. So, and it just so happened, so it wasn't really like I was seeking answers, but, you know, when you're ready, life finds a way to teach you things. So it just so happened that I went on a personal, a kind of a vacation. And as a part of a solo vacation, I just took up a retreat, a 4-day silent retreat. And that's how it all started, like pop. And the main thing that came through from that retreat was that I can be with the breath. I don't have to all the time think myself out of issues. Staying with my breath is a valid thing. It was a silent retreat, which was very breath focused. It was that kind of a retreat. So that started this whole new process. Thereafter, I've been to many meditation traditions, Mahayana, Theravada, but also Advaitic traditions. I've studied some of Shankaracharya's work, also the contemporary sages like Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta Maharaja. So then that whole interest started, you know, that deep, what is this all about? And what is really going on? There's so much to know about the mind. And very interestingly, psychology speaks of behavior, motivation, problem solving, thinking, but mind as a concept is not something that they're able to place. So suddenly here are traditions that speak of the mind as an experience, the mind as something you're engaging with on a day-to-day basis. So this became, and this is experiential, right? Like you experience your mind all the time. So it became very experiential. It moved out of the just intellect and the cognitive space, and it came into a very experiential space. Then what added to all of this was my study in somatic psychology. So then I studied that for 10 years almost, and found where I could go sort of deeper in that. And it was beautifully complementary. This whole idea of being in the present, staying centered in the here and now, connecting with what is happening now, with also connecting what is happening inside the body. So that's how this whole orientation has sort of developed. So I have the background, a solid psychology background that's very helpful, and with it the somatic, with it the mindfulness and the Eastern philosophical traditions, and together it's a fantastic dish actually. So it's really useful, really helpful when it comes to working with yourself and with clients. So some very striking learnings for me from this whole approach is what I wanted to share with you. One is that I realized you cannot believe in your mind fully. And that was a huge learning, because you are so much in tune, you know, you're so caught up in the mind. I cannot even say in tune, caught up in the mind. You're so much believing everything your mind says. Like, okay, for example, I'll give you an illustration of somebody I was working with. So I will talk about these learnings with an example so it makes more sense. I was recently working with a woman who said that, who came in for some kind of couples work, but she came in alone in the beginning. And she said that, yes, I know my husband loves me, but I always will come second to his parents. Because when it comes to his parents, he's always going to put them before me. And I always feel a little less loved when it comes to them. And a typical approach would be to try and understand the process of the mind, to say, okay, there's conditioning involved, but then what is the experience of feeling unloved, right? You cannot believe everything the mind says, but the feeling is real. Now, I'm making a distinction. I'm saying the thought, I am second, I am not loved, is debatable. Is it real? Is it not? We can go back and forth over it. The husband will say, I stay with her 24/7. I give her attention 11 months a year, 11 and a half months a year. Oh, I'm with my parents for 15 days. Obviously, I will put them first. So that's debatable. We can go on and on in circles, establishing boundaries, and that's useful work. But what is the experience of feeling unloved? It's a real experience. And that experience is in the present moment. It's not anywhere else. It's now. As she says it, she feels it. It's real for her. And what does it mean to stay with that experience? What does it mean to create capacity in your body for that experience? What does it mean to sit with it without saying it's right or wrong? It's not right to feel this way, or it's right. So everybody, including the therapist, often gets caught up in this whole what's right, what's wrong. No, your husband needs to understand. No, you need to understand. Nobody needs to understand. Everybody's super conditioned and is just responding. So what does it mean to simply be then? What does it mean to stay with the experience in the moment? And then second, what does it mean to be unloved? It's your experience of being less loved. Can you be less loved? If yes, if no, what's around it? That's therapeutic, because then that's creating space in the body to embody what you're really feeling, instead of getting caught up in the mind about whether or not you should be feeling it. Because usually what happens is the moment this kind of an unpleasant experience comes up, you're quick to say, oh, it's, I don't know, I'm oversensitive, or, oh, he's not sensitive, or, you know, either or, because there is no perfect answer. The truth is, there's no real answer which will perfectly fit the truth. But the experience is true. It's in the moment. And to the extent you feel it, it is the truth. It doesn't have to be anything, right, wrong. So there's no judgment towards it. There's no reactivity towards it. It's a feeling you sit with. You don't push it away. You don't justify. You do nothing. Now that's mighty difficult, because the inertia of the mind is to make stories about it, to go on and on in some kind of a mental storytelling. And before you don't know where you are. And the experience is completely pushed into your body, and that feeling unloved is just going to stay with you, and it's going to come up again and again and again. So it's not processed, because you've dealt with it at a cognitive level. You've never dealt with it at a feeling level, right? So something like this, something as soft and as vulnerable and as unsettling as feeling unloved, can slowly turn into a beautiful awareness experience and an experience of expansion. And then, of course, there's so much deeper about what is this need to be loved, and where is it coming from, and even the are questions about the ego, and so many things after that. So I feel that this kind of an entry point comes to me because of mindfulness, comes to me because of somatic therapy, because of Buddhist psychology, because of Advaita questions of who am I, and because of this whole psychological context that has come. So it's a wonderful combination to work with. Am I finished with my 15 minutes? So then I should keep quiet.
Okay. So thank you, Sadia. That was very illuminating. And I'm just going to check if our friends have any questions to ask you at this point, or anything that they want to share. You can either type it in the chat box, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so while maybe I give you a little bit of time to think, I would like to ask Sadia something. Sadia, can you please share in what context you started studying somatic psychology? Because I didn't realize that, I mean, like, with whom did you study? Or like now you said you almost studied it for 10 years. And that's very significant. So also how, because it's of course something very, very experiential. It's not just something study, you are practicing it on yourself, you are having experiences. So first, just the logistics of where you studied, but how has the landscape of your own emotional world transformed over these 10 years? And then how do you see it working in your clients?
Right. Over 10 years, because the teacher, the person who was teaching us, is someone who stays in Germany. And he is an Indian who lives there, who did his PhD in Advaita Vedanta and Jungian psychology. So he's a very interesting person himself. His name is Dr. Raja Selvam. And what he has done is he has been teaching somatic experiencing, which is a very famous branch of somatic work. But he has started a space called integral somatic psychotherapy, where he's applying techniques of somatic experiencing to the, especially to the psychotherapeutic space, which is a little different, because often what happens in somatic experiencing is you end up observing trauma, but also then learning to discharge some of it. And we'll talk more when, we talk about trauma. But in somatic experiencing, you're creating a space to stay with the experience, okay? And in mindfulness, you're doing exactly that. When you're mindful of emotions, mindful of body, what you're doing is you're creating space in your body and in your mind, and in your experience of creating space to be able to be with stuff. So it's, you see, it's completely gelling with each other. So I studied with this person, and over 10 years he kept visiting India, and I kept following the courses he did and repeating them if necessary, and practice. And I had a lot of possibility for practice because I have a psychotherapeutic practice. So I had always had clients with whom I could practice it. And the mindfulness element helped me to practice it with myself. I had also done Vipassana, which is very somatic in nature, where you're always observing your body. So now you have a combination of observing your body from a non-reactivity standpoint, but you also have the ability to stay with your body and tolerate emotions, and the understanding why you want to do it. And what it has done or helped me with is that, I feel it's made me a very happy person. It's quite something to say, but it's nice. It's been a very lovely journey, because a whole lot of stuff that would hurt or bother or be very unsettling, sometimes even now hurts and is unsettling, but it's not impacting. It's almost like you have developed some kind of it doesn't go deep. That's it. So it's light. It comes, it stays for a while, it passes away, and you have also no reason to meddle with it. You almost believe it's going to come and pass away. That's the way it is. You have understood that stuff will happen, you will feel hurt, you'll feel sad, then you stay for a while, and then the sadness will go, because it can't stay forever. You don't feed it stories, and it won't grow. So here you have a mindfulness practice. So I don't feel either of them would have been as complete for me as they are with each other. I almost cannot talk of either of them separately. The mindfulness practice and the somatic practice, I almost cannot separate them anymore in my head, at least, because for me, both are a practice together. To be able to sit with something and to not feed it stories, and to know why I'm not feeding it stories. When a thought comes that is dissatisfying, it's easy for me to say, this is dukkha. This is dissatisfaction. This is a thought of, this is not helpful. This is dukkha. So if I can see it as dukkha, I can watch it. And then I have somatic psychology to know how to sit with it. And so it's overall a very holistic experience. So that's what it is.
Thank you so much. Sadia, there is a question from Angela.
Mm-hmm. Can you ask somebody? Ask me?
Yeah, I can ask you. I was just interested in what your somatic work looks like with clients. What you do with them, and whether you're also using breath work in that, or how do you work with others?
Right. So I use pranayama, which is the breathwork approach from the yogic traditions, and I use that as a way of opening up the physiology. So what happens is when we are talking about mindfulness, often what we are doing is just watching. But sometimes clients come with a lot of stuff and they can't just watch. It's too overwhelming to just watch. Let's say there's too much heaviness in your chest, or you're choked in your throat with fear. Just watching at that stage is very difficult. So what I would do with the client at that stage is I would pay attention and create observation, but I would use breath, movement, touch, all of these to open up areas of the body to help lighten the the intensity, and then to work in a titrated fashion with low intensity. So if the client goes into very low intensity, kind of forgets about their experience, and, oh, I'm feeling great and happy, I might have to even get the experience back to work with it. And if there's overwhelm, then, so, you keep it in the window of tolerance. Do you know the window of tolerance? Have you heard about it? So basically, window of tolerance is when you're neither hyper aroused nor hypo aroused, which means neither the system is so aroused that it cannot tolerate anything, nor it is so flax that there is nothing activating the system. So you get them into that space. So when the client is like completely forgotten or is just moved off into some tangent, I might get the client back and say, oh, you were talking about this. That must have been really painful. They're back in the story. Okay, we use the story and then we stop the story and come into the body and we process the emotion in the body. But if there is overwhelm, then you'll use touch. There are times clients feel frozen, so I would say, okay, just get up and walk a little and see how that feels. Or I might use the breath as well. So many tools to just manage. So from a neurological perspective, I'm managing the arousal and working with the trauma.
Well, that really dovetails very well with the next question that I have for you. And if I don't see any other questions from our participants right away, so I'm going to ask the second question. And of course, we have ample of time to. So, because as a group so far, I mean, it is our plan that we will do also more study of psychology, especially psychology from the point of view of non-dual wisdom traditions. And we will also look at its connection with neuroscience and cognitive science. But since we don't have that introduction right now, I would love if you could speak a little bit more about what exactly is emotional resilience, what is the autonomic nervous system, and how can somatic and meditation practices help to regulate the autonomic nervous system as a means to develop, to expand, and to stabilize our zone of emotional resilience. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, another big question, Tejal. Another long question. Okay, so let's start with the first one. What is emotional resilience? Very simplistically speaking, I would say emotional resilience is an ability to stay with an emotion without getting terribly overwhelmed and to bounce back from a down back to kind of, when I say down, it doesn't mean bounce back, doesn't mean you push it away, means that you are able to come back to functioning in the way you've been functioning even after you've been hit by a situation. So you take your time to process that, but you're able to come back. It does not completely shatter you, or doesn't put you into a zone of where you don't feel steady anymore. So emotional resilience, I would simplistically describe as an ability to be able to manage your emotions in a way that you don't feel completely pushed down when something doesn't work in your life. Now, talking about how autonomic nervous system and emotional resilience works, just understanding the autonomic nervous system. There is a part of the nervous system.
Should we show the slide?
Yeah, we can show the slide. Yeah.
Nivita, can you please show the slide of the autonomic nervous system? Great, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So autonomic nervous system has, as you can see, two aspects, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is just one part of the nervous system, which involves those bodily organs that are out of our control, but which are not voluntary muscles, which are not voluntary, muscular groups. So like your heart, it will pump whether or not you try to make it pump, right? Even if you're sleeping, it'll pump, or your breath will work, or your pupils will dilate depending on the amount of light, and so on and so forth. Now, what happens is, or digestion, all of that works with the autonomic nervous system. Now, there are two parts to this nervous system. One part in charge of arousal and one part in charge of relaxation. The sympathetic nervous system is in charge of arousal, which means that if you are threatened with danger, for example, if there's a loud sound, you immediately try and shut your ears. I mean, you don't have to think this through, right? Or if there's a truck coming towards you, you immediately move out of its way. There is peripheral vision and your system reacts immediately. Now, this immediate reaction comes without you having to think about it. How does that happen? Because it's controlled by the autonomic aspect of the nervous system, which is taking care of you, protecting you, even if you're not cognitively aware or consciously aware of it. So it is in arousal very easily when you're faced with danger, right? When you have any fear of threat or harm, the sympathetic nervous system will act up, and it will put you into what is called a fight or flight reaction, which is you're ready to fight or you're ready to run away, right? So typically, if a lion or a tiger is chasing a deer, the deer is in fight or flight. It's going to run away, and all its heart is going to pump more blood. It needs more energy in its eyes. It needs more energy in its ears. It needs more energy in its arms and in its limbs. Similarly, all this will shift in the body. There'll be more energy in the limbs, and the deer will be able to use all the energy resources to run. That's your fight and flight. But when the chase is over, and if the deer survives and the chase is over, it calms down. And the relaxation response comes in, the parasympathetic response comes in. Now, what does this do? It reintegrates energy into the body. It says, okay, now the hands don't need extra energy. Now the legs don't need extra energy. Now the pupils don't need extra energy. Now let's get the energy back into the digestion. Let's get it back into the breathing. Let's reduce the heart rate and so on. So the relaxation response takes over. Now, both the sympathetic and parasympathetic responses, the parasympathetic response is the rest and digest response, which means you're relaxed. And when you're relaxed, you can digest better, because digestion needs the energy that has been actually pushed away into the sympathetic nervous system when you need to fight something. Now, when the parasympathetic, so the way the two systems work is in alternance. The parasympathetic system comes up when the danger is there, the sympathetic system acts up. When the danger is gone, the parasympathetic system acts up. And so like a wave in alternance, they're supposed to work. Now, if you understand this, then you understand what can happen if you're sitting peacefully at your desk, but you're worrying about the meeting tomorrow. What is going to happen? The sympathetic nervous system is going to act up even though there is no real danger in the present. Now you have moved into arousal, into fight and flight without there being danger. You don't need to run. You don't need to fight. But there's energy in your hands. There's energy in your legs. Your eyes are wide awake because you cannot sleep when you're worrying. So you lose the ability, the insomnia, the fidgeting in your arms and legs is all because you're in sympathetic arousal without needing sympathetic arousal. Now, what is happening with a lot of us is because of this excessive tendency to think and worry, and we don't just worry about meetings tomorrow, we worry, if nothing else, we worry about whether we are doing well in life, whether we are achieving our goals, whether we are living meaningful lives. There's so many things we think about. And so what ends up happening in the process is we get stuck in sympathetic arousal with very little space for real parasympathetic rest and digest. Over a period of time, there's too much arousal in the system. The energy is being unnecessarily utilized by systems which don't need the energy. Okay, and the energy is not given to systems like digestion, etc., which need the energy. So you start getting lifestyle diseases. You start getting diabetes, or you start getting, digestive issues. And that's how an emotional issue or a mental issue translates into a physical symptom. This is the psychosomatic logic through which something translates into a physical symptom. So what meditation would do, what mindfulness would do is, imagine you're sitting on this table and you're thinking about the meeting tomorrow, and mindfulness will tell you, hey, you're here. Let's pay attention to this. And it's not even that you should not think about the meeting tomorrow. If you set aside 15 minutes to plan about the meeting tomorrow, you're fine. But you think in cycles about that meeting without being conscious of that thought. The thought keeps visiting and keeps putting you into sympathetic arousal again and again and again. Maybe throughout the evening even. And then what happens? Your alternance is disturbed. So when you're mindful, when you can pay attention to your breath, when you can pay attention to the connection of your feet on the ground, when you can pay attention to what is happening now, the signal going to the brain is, if you're able to pay attention to your breath, you must not be in danger. So the meeting idea, that the fear of meeting brings up the sympathetic, but the idea of being with your breath brings up the parasympathetic. It tells the brain, oh, there cannot be danger, because if there was danger, she wouldn't be focusing on her breath, right? And so slowly you're retraining the brain to allow this alternance to come as and when needed, rather than being stuck in a particular aroused system. So your rest and digest can come up again and again, and when it is not needed, there's no fight or flight. And when it is needed, you actually have more energy for fight or flight, because you have conserved that energy also. So that's how the autonomic nervous system can work. So this is the alternance that I was talking about, and how the energy can dissipate when an action is completed. But how it will not dissipate if you're worrying about something, if you're caught up in thinking. So again, going back to the previous point, you need to remind yourself that you don't need to think about everything, at least not all the time, not when it occurs to you, and that a lot of it is also just dissatisfaction related thinking. It's not required.
Thank you, Sadia. Thank you so much. And Nivita, can you please remove the slide? Thank you. So here we are. Please, questions. Priyadarshini has asked a question on the chat. Priyadarshini, would you like to ask that yourself? Okay, so I'm going to ask on Priyadarshini's behalf. Priyadarshini is saying, if you get non-functional from a triggered trauma.
Sorry, please again. Sorry.
If you get non-functional from a triggered trauma, what is the best quick hack to kickstart?
After the quick hacks, that's all I can say. There's no quick hack. All quick hacks sometimes can lead to re-traumatizing you, sometimes can lead to all kinds of different reactions. There is no quick hack to anything. You have to slowly understand your mind and body, process the emotions that are underlying the trauma, and only then you can move forward from the trauma. You have to give yourself time space, patience, be your own friend through that process. You know, this quick hack itself is fundamentally telling us that it's unpleasant. A trigger has come up, it's unpleasant, and we don't want to see it. And when you don't want to see something that's happening in yourself, you're actually telling a part, like you're also telling yourself, I don't like this. I don't like this part of myself. So the trauma is not getting support from even you. Often it has been perpetrated by some environmental situation, somebody else, something happened environmentally, you didn't cause it. But even you're not willing to support it. You're not willing to love it for what it is. So in a way, the highest form of self-love is to love parts of yourself which are the most difficult to love. And what comes up in trauma is very difficult to love. It's not easy. It doesn't make us feel good. But I would say that you don't have to address all of it at one go, but you address small pieces of it. You work with a trauma therapist if it's a lot, because sometimes you need even, not just that you can't handle it on your own, it's not that, but sometimes somebody who's witnessing your process also helps the trauma to have more than one support system. It's almost like two people are supporting. It's a soft spot, it's a vulnerable spot. And you need to support it, but sometimes when you're being unkind, even the therapist is there to support it. So in that sense, I feel that having a therapist to support trauma is very, very required and very helpful. Personally, I feel that. And the mindfulness practices, slow practices, a lot of yoga, I would say, can help a lot because it helps you with the body and the breath. And so it gives you a lot of gross support to work with the trauma. Sometimes in a subtle way, it's difficult to work with it to start with, but when you have breath with you, when you have opening up your body through yoga, it can be very, very useful to help with trauma.
Thank you so much. I see that Anurima has a question, please.
This is like a follow-up to the concept of the trauma bit that you shared. So if a person who's gone through trauma but is not in a state to deal with that trauma, like I think a lot of what you say is making sense, but I'm also like, at this point, witnessing, at least like I'm very openly sharing with my daughter, she's not willing to work on her trauma at this point. And I can be understanding, but I'm also worried that, not working on it can only make things worse because she's sort of getting into situations which are probably calling more trauma in different ways. And where I'm stuck is how, how can I make this easier for her?
No, that's a very good question, and I can't say I have an answer to it, but I will see what I feel it would be the best approach, because sometimes we push people to deal with the trauma a little earlier than they're ready. And that's also not really helpful. Like sometimes somebody who's addicted to something will come and say, but I like being addicted, but I like it, but I don't want to give it up, and it's so difficult for us to say, hey, that's not good for you, or you're escaping something, and that's why there's addiction. It's not going to help at that time. So I don't think we can push people before they are ready to deal with anything, but I think we can do a lot of compassion practices for them, not add our worry to the mix, believe in the larger universal intelligence and its support. Everybody has to go through certain things and learn certain things in due course of time. And if we have that understanding, because we've come to think, see, you are here today, you're a part of this group, how much of it is you're doing really? So much of it is about things happening around you and a course and a journey getting created for you. How much of what I am telling you today is my doing? I could not have done it even if I wanted to, let's say. It's just that things come along. You go to a retreat, something clicks, you find something clicks. And before you know it, when you look back, you say, oh, I've done this, I've done that. That's just a manner of speaking. But the truth is, you've been held and taken And the trauma you went through before that also was needed to go through this, because everything shaped you. So the belief in the larger intelligence, that it will support her. And maybe in your heart, you can do a lot of compassion practice for her, wish well for her, pray for her, whatever that means. I mean, for me, a prayer is just nothing but a well-wishing sent out in the universe for someone to be supported. So doing that, having all that love, not adding worry to the mix is the best you can do. And then hoping that that creation of energetic support is going to penetrate in its own time and way.
Thank you. Before I take more questions, Priyadarshini said thank you. And there is a comment from Nora which says, thank you, Sadia. You're explaining everything so well. It's very helpful to hear you. And sorry, I see Maria's hand up. And I also see that there is a question in the chat from Chloe. I don't know if Chloe's is a comment or a question because I haven't read it as yet. But
Ruchi also has a question.
So Chloe, while I'm reading yours, can I offer the mic to Maria and then to Ruchi and then come to you, please? Is that okay? So Maria, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Sadia. It's really nice to hear you. And I just wanted to add, if I may add something to Anurima's question, actually, because your question reminded me of, I had done a short training with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who has written this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And in terms of the role of a parent or caregiver or teacher to a child in the context of trauma, like a helpful role is that one of an affect regulator, like someone who helps regulate their emotions. So things that a parent or a teacher or caregiver can do to help regulate the child's emotions at that point when the child has is having kind of extreme emotions. Anything that they can do at that point can really also help with with the trauma and with working through the trauma. So I just remember that and wanted to add that. Yeah. And I also have a question for Sadia, but I can wait for that until later because I know there are a lot of other questions as well. So
if you are speaking, you're welcome to also ask the question if you want now.
Yeah, so I mean, and maybe Sadia, maybe you'll be speaking of this later, but I was also really interested to hear how your practice and study of Advaita Vedanta informs your work as well, how that sort of comes in.
Sure. It all comes in together actually because it all ties in. Because Advaita is more, I feel, a position of I simply am, right? The core position of Advaita is I am not this or that. I am, like you are the truth. Sat Chit Ananda, you are the eternal bliss. Now, when I see it from Advaita, I see that there is this joyful awareness, and this is the practice actually that we will be doing at the end, the practice of joyful awareness in the moment. That's where the Advaita helps me to recognize, because I can feel it experientially, and I'm sure all of you will feel it today, to some extent experientially, that's the reality. If you're mindful in the moment and you let everything else that you're holding go, you can experience that moment of complete justness, beingness, just being. And then the Buddhist idea helps me to recognize that this is dukkha. So much of what you're thinking and going through in the phenomenal reality, so to say, is so informed by conditioning. Personal conditioning, social conditioning, evolutional conditioning, all kinds of conditioning, right? Karmic conditioning, all kinds of conditioning, right? But when you step back, even deeply mindful for some time, the Advaitic idea of I am, just I am. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not Sadia. I don't have to own any of this. all of this is passing, impermanent. I don't have to own it. I'm owning it it's not helping me. Owning this is not helping me. What is that pure feeling of not owning this? So Advaita is that. And of course, the self-inquiry method comes from Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, which also kind of corroborates how to orient yourself. But it's not something I just believe in. It's something I feel very experientially.
Thank you so much, everyone, and also Sadia. So there is a question here from Ruchi Parekh, and she would like me to ask the question. So I'm going to read it. I've read about and observed that repressed emotions can make different parts of the body feel blocked or in pain. And there are many different ways to release these emotions, such as affirmations, Reiki, EFT, and the like. And in the current moment, I do feel that these blocks can sometimes become overwhelming. And despite all the techniques I have learned, I'm unable to really apply those to myself in the best way. What do you think would be the best approach in such a situation? Thank you.
See, Ruchi, all these approaches are extremely helpful. But what I feel is even a little more helpful is understanding that doing away with these emotions is not something we want to do. A lot of times, because it's very unpleasant, and I understand, I've worked with people very intimately, I get it. I mean, I'm not lightening the problem. I know that this is overwhelming and this is upsetting, and sitting with that is not easy. But trying to do away with that is going to actually lead to more fixing, which actually has led to this kind of, tie up in a deeper sense. So it's in a way, see, it's not that Reiki is not helpful, but doing Reiki to fix things is not helpful. Even doing meditation to fix things may not be helpful. Even following spirituality to fix things is not helpful. So everything is a mode, is a method, but the attitude with which you do it. But if we work with emotions to know them, there's this beautiful saying, I think it's a Sufi saying, to understand is to love. If you really try to understand, as if you are a child, as if these emotions were children, hey, what's going on with you? Like that soft and gentle an approach. This is pain. I mean, this is raw pain. And we go through this. I mean, we just live and stuff happens. And we don't have any method of making sense of it. And we repress, we suppress, we have defenses, we deal with it in the best way we know. In the best way we know, whatever that way is. Only as adult psychology tells us, oh, this is a defense mechanism and that's a defense. Hello, too late, right? It already has happened. The defenses are in place. So the softness that you have to bring to this, and the love you have to bring to this, and the understanding you have to bring to this is very gentle. So don't try to do away with it, but just say, I'm going to understand, and I'm going to stay with it for as long as it takes. And I'll do yoga, and I'll do Reiki, and I'll do whatever is needed. But I don't know why this has come. I don't know what it has to teach me. I don't know what my learnings are from this. I don't know when it will go. But while it's there, it can teach me to love my difficult parts of me a little more. Because if there were no difficult parts, how would you learn to love them? No. So it can definitely teach you that.
Thank you. And from Chloe, there is a comment and a suggestion. Chloe, would you like to share it yourself? Or do you want me to read it? Or it's just for the group? Or if you can.
It was actually, I also started later than the rest. I'm apologizing, but I think I just heard it maybe in my own way. But when someone is really in a freeze state, it's a different situation than when we're talking about healing on a long-term basis. And if you have very strong, overwhelming feelings, I find these techniques not so helpful because they, when the emotion is up to here, to find a place to breathe. And it's different when we're talking about when it's a process,
Sure.
talking about it as a process, or talking about it in the instant when someone's deeply triggered. Like when you read an article about something that happened to you and your body gets triggered. So I was just also wondering if the question is in related to the process, or because people are also talking about overwhelming emotions. So I was curious what you would respond from that standpoint when someone is in the moment of the deep trigger. What is a way to apply that gentleness? Because it's a hard freeze, and gentleness is far away from.
And I said this earlier also, that a lot of movement is what I would suggest, but not so it's like this, okay? You move from subtle to gross depending on the overwhelm of the emotion. If it is in the realm of tolerance, somewhat tolerance, you try to stay with it. If it's a little out of tolerance, maybe you take some deep breaths and work with that. If it's absolutely out of tolerance, you move. You don't try to sit with something that difficult, but you come back to it with love later. It's okay for now to have to push it away or to move it out of your system. And that's what I told earlier also, that when you're talking about an hyper aroused state, a state of freeze, like it's a highly triggered state, right? And it's a state where the system is not moving. Now you need the brain to associate with this state with overwhelm with the possibility of movement, for example, right? The freeze is intense fear. There's intense fear. And so even if you can move a finger for now in that fear, it is some movement out of that freeze. So gentle movements, as gentle or as not gentle as needed. Tremendous overwhelm, maybe even less gentle movement, maybe even grosser and bigger movements. Like we would help clients to create boundaries or push or all of that in some level of overwhelm, or move very slowly in some level of overwhelm, or just stay with it in a lower level of overwhelm. So you titrate your intervention as per the requirements of arousal. But that understanding comes to the therapist through their own resonance, to the client statement, but also through what they are feeling in their body as they sit with the clients, because you're also going through that trauma with the client, right? It's not personal to you, but the body is responding to the client's heart rate is high, your heart rate is going to be high. So like Maria spoke of affect regulation, you're also regulating your own affect as a therapist while you're working with your clients. And that's why having a witness to the therapeutic process, having another person there to regulate affect for whom this trauma is not personal, is helpful. But someone who understands the process very strongly, very clearly, can be helpful. Chloe, does that answer your question? Does it say something to you?
Yeah, I was actually responding to Priya Darshini, so I was wondering also for her, if I maybe understood her correctly. I didn't want to step in, but it were just thoughts that came to me. But I'm wondering if other people maybe could respond, or her, if she.
So just Priyadarshini has responded on the chat saying, yes, Chloe, that's what I meant about Kickstart. So also thank you for, bringing that up. And I just, Chloe, if I may add, Chloe in her chat has said that I like Priyadarshini's question. When there is a strong trigger and the body goes into tension and anxiety, a freeze even, it can be very challenging to fall back on yoga, meditation, talking about it. In my experience, and even a therapy session can in certain cases be too exhausting. The body needs to first find a place to land. Sometimes what helps me to break this is take a shower, smell, taste, go to the senses.
And whatever the intervention is, the smallest or the largest, depending on what's possible at that time, but something to interrupt. But also what I would add is that's that intervention for the moment, but all of the other stuff is required to build into that as a support. while you can't do interventions at the toughest time, they are all very useful as a culminating space.
Thank you. And Marina would like to share something. Please, Marina.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to read my comment, and it might be helpful because we're talking a lot about trauma, but I think what Sadia is saying is also very important to understand anxiety, which is of course also related to traumas, but it's, so part of the reactions we're talking about. So thank you for what you're saying, especially about the autonomous nervous system's reactions. That matches really well what I've learned and been thinking about anxiety in the past months. Because anxiety brings fear of something that's not strictly in the present, in the embodied reality, but it can trigger stress, like the autonomous, the sympathetic nervous system reaction. And it took me so long to accept that, because I was being taught, so to speak, that when I feel anxious about something, I'm already projecting a reality, thinking about the possible consequences of the now, thinking about what I'm doing or not doing for what I want, or whatever. It has to do with a fear that is dislocated in time, even if it doesn't feel like it's strictly about the future. And people are like, this danger is not real because it's not there right now. And for me, it was so hard to really digest and understand that, because of course it's real in the sense that it is affecting the reality in the next millisecond, in the near future. Of course, what we do now affects what's happening in the future. So it's hard not to think that anxious thoughts are not really about what's real, but really to understand that the danger is not real. I'm not in danger. And danger sounds like a strong word also for some of the things we face, but it's essentially the reaction. So it's very helpful to think about that also in a somatic way, and comparing that to the way that the autonomous nervous system works. Something I have to remind myself all the time of. And then the next thing that I remind myself of, though, when I fall into reactions that I know are related to anxiety or feel it again, is that I find some kind of joy in thinking, I'm looking forward for the moment in this process that is long, when I will no longer feel it. And then I feel calm and confident that this is going to happen, that I will overcome it because I am in the process.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marina, for sharing.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I feel what would also be very helpful is to just feel that there's no problem in feeling what you're feeling in this moment. There's nothing to shift or change or fix. That itself is a lowering of anxiety. You see, it's very ironical. Anxiety of anxiety. Anxiety of fixing anxiety, stress of anxiety, stress of getting anxiety. That's even feeding anxiety, no? So the idea that we should not be anxious is underlying even the feeling of anxiety. So what we do is we shift focus, like you said, to the somatic, and you say, okay, I am anxious. Can I feel anxious now? Then there is no anxiety of anxiety. So you've taken away the secondary emotions, and you've sat with the primary stuff, which is there for whatever reason. That, when not fed over a period of time, can lead to a certain rebalancing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sadia. I'm really reminded so much of the teachings of a great teacher called Mingyo Rinpoche, who is a great meditation master. And he had very bad anxiety attacks as a child, and he often speaks about his experience of what was that shifting point at which his panic attacks stopped making him panicky, is the point where he said, he was always trying to push the panic attacks away, always trying to, oh no, here it's again, and it was at this point where he said, oh, hello, panic, with a genuine interest on wanting to make friends with his panic. And he said, when I finally came to that point, the panic left. And actually, I will share this video clip with all of you as part of the deepening talk this week. It's very relevant, and it's very beautiful to hear that also from a practicing psychologist for 20 years, you know, that we have to recognize that these are energies of the mind manifesting in different shapes and colors. So it's a very beautiful take-home message. And with that, I will ask you my next question, which is, you know, maybe it has already come up, but this is, so with this study of somatic psychotherapy and the way you incorporate it in your practice with your clients, can you please tell us more both about the theoretical framework of this form of therapy? And here I'm particularly interested because you said, you know, mindfulness and somatic therapy go hand in hand, but there's probably something perhaps which somatic therapy gave you, which adds much more to then, let's say, what comes out of the mindfulness. Not that there's any difference, but maybe there are some structure or frameworks. So if you can share some theory about the somatic therapy, what are these structures and frameworks which are over and above what the mindfulness traditions provide, and how they help in your work that you have done for trauma release, PTSD, you know, either with individuals or with groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about, let's say, how patterns form, not just trauma, but how any pattern forms. Okay, how do psychological patterns form? For example, let's say social anxiety as an example. What happens in social anxiety? There are certain thoughts, right? The person is thinking of certain thoughts like, if I go to, let's say there's a person having social anxiety and he has been invited to a party or she's been invited to a party. The thoughts are, oh my God, there'll be too many people, I'll be judged, right? These are the kind of thoughts. They'll be judged, people will look at me, they'll think I'm awkward, whatever the thoughts are. Then there are emotions. There's an emotion of anxiety, there's possibly an emotion of fear even, right? Then there are body sensations. There could be palpitation, there could be sweating, whatever fight or flight, arousal related body sensation. There could be uneasiness in the stomach, sense of queasiness, sweaty hands. Then there is the behavior or the action, or what you can see on the face. If he does go to the party, maybe avoid eye contact, or sit in the corner by themselves, or move away when somebody comes to approach. Now, you see, there are so many different aspects of a social anxiety pattern. There are thoughts, there are emotions, there are beliefs behind them also, actions, body sensations. Now, what happens is, over a period of time, it doesn't start this way. Nobody starts with social anxiety. But over a period of time, some of these lead to the mind-body connect leads to these reactions becoming more and more associated with each other. So there's a rule called the Hebb's rule. Neurons that wire together, fire together. It's a rule of neuroplasticity, which means it's a rule that says those brain cells involved in these patterns or these different reactions, if they occur at the same time, if they fire at the same time, they get wired, they get associated. It's exactly what happens in trauma as well. There's a sound of running water and an event which is irrelevant maybe to something happening at that time. Maybe somebody was, a child was getting physically beaten up, but there was some water running in the background at that time, and those two get associated. So two or more things that are happening in the present can get associated. And every time this person who goes through social anxiety will have more and more of these. So these thoughts will come, these feelings will come, these sensations will come, these actions will come. Now, the number of times all this comes together, the more entrenched in the nervous system it becomes its own neural pathway. It becomes its own set of, you can say these neurons become friends. And they start wiring together. And then what happens is, somebody comes and says, hey, there's a party invitation. The body sensations have come, the behavior has come, the avoidance has come, the defense has come. Before even processing whether this party is as threatening as a party where it all started was, the trigger or the one word or the sense that I might get an invitation for the party can also trigger all of this. So there is a neuronal wiring, firing that is constantly going on. And if neurons fire together, they will keep wiring together. Now, to this mix, now you have to add mindfulness, which is what? Or somatic observation. You have added a new set of neurons to this mix now. You've put a new ingredient in the dish. You've added some basil. The dish is going to change. You've added awareness to the mix. Now, initially, the awareness will not become a part of the pattern. But as the person practices, every time this thought comes up, these body sensations, he says, okay, I'm going to watch. Okay, I'm going to watch. I'm not going to fix this. I'm going to watch. I'm going to watch. Now, there's a new set of neurons that are becoming a part of the same pattern. So what somatic psychotherapy is doing is it's adding. It's doing two things. It's adding a bunch of things like movement, breath. Mindfulness is also doing that, adding awareness to existing patterns as new ingredients and slowly creating these neuronal associations. So just about 40 to 50 years ago, the research showed that there is neuroplasticity, the brain can change. Until now, there was belief that the brain doesn't change. But now it says the brain is going to change with every experience it is getting. So all the time the brain is changing. But it's changing either to entrench the pattern or to move away from the pattern depending on your choices. You see where the conscious is coming and interacting with the subconscious now? Everything is autonomic and automatic. There's no control over that. But when you choose to pay attention, the information is going into the brain, new set of neurons are firing along with the old pattern, and now a new pattern is establishing, which is a pattern of awareness while anxious, awareness while avoidant, awareness while defenses are coming up. Somatic therapy does the same thing. It adds even more, not just awareness, but even more active approaches. Awareness while movement, awareness while breath, awareness while knowing fear in the body, tracking fear in the body, for example. So I'm afraid, I'm feeling afraid of being in the party. Now, mindfulness tells me I watch my fear, but somatic tells me my fear is also in my feet. And it'll give me the information and my feet feel frozen. And so I'll take a couple of steps with awareness of fear. And that's very different from taking a couple of steps without awareness of fear. Because then I have interrupted a bodily sensation pattern in the body. Is this making sense? So there is a body pattern that has come up in response to emotions, thoughts, etc. But on a body level, I am creating a different pattern. On an awareness level, I'm creating a different pattern. On the level of Buddhist understanding of dukkha, I'm creating a different, no, I can't believe in what my thoughts are saying. These are thoughts of judgment. I'm practicing non-judgment. A different pattern. Now, so many different support systems have come added to the traumatic or the existent pattern. And over a period of time, these are new pathways, of course. So the old pathways are deeply entrenched. The new pathways are like small little roads that you walk on, which are not yet highways. The old pathways are like highways. But as you practice, the new pathways can become more and more solid and more accessible. And then the system changes, the brain changes, and that's neuroplasticity. So that's what the structure of somatic therapy kind of adds to.
And please, can you say, perhaps if you feel that there is anything that you could illustrate specifically from a client history where somebody had extreme trauma and then, working with somatic practice. I mean, I think we've covered a lot. We have covered a lot, but if you feel that there is anything more that,
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you some example. There's some feedback from there. I'll give you some examples. Just as an instance, I remember right now that there was a girl I was working with, the history of sexual abuse, and she was the person who was, abusing her was always coming from behind her. Okay, and she didn't know why she was always having a sense of being followed, a sense of being attacked from behind. She always, and she didn't even know she had that. I mean, she wasn't even aware she had that, but there was always this fear when she was walking alone, anywhere, even if she knew the place is completely safe, she was in a country that was safe. And she said that I always feel like somebody's coming from behind, something is happening, or and also that she had some back pain that we were working with. Okay, and it was in the lower regions of the body. So then I said, okay, we sit with this and let's see what comes up for you. And so typically what I do is I just start with sitting with the client. I say, okay, let's observe this as you speak to me. What comes up for you? Is there pain coming up? Is there fear? What is coming up? And initially nothing much comes up, but as they narrate their experience and I help them to kind of get into that experience a little more, stuff starts to come up like this fear or whatever. And then we did a lot of work with creating boundaries from behind. So usually, you use a lot of hand movement to create boundaries. But then I even would ask questions sometimes that, can you notice if you felt stronger right now, what would your body want to do? And maybe something would come up like, I would want to turn behind. I would want to push behind. I would want to ask, what is it? Or I would want to say, stop it. And then you encourage the client to use the words or the sound or the even an animal like growl or whatever comes up for them. Whatever comes up for them, you allow that, because that is energy that's stuck in the body. It's energy from the trauma that's stuck in the body. It's stuck in the physiology. And so it could be, and for this person, on multiple sessions we worked with pushing and creating boundaries through hands and legs behind. So pushing with the legs, pushing with the hands. We also created turning around responses when a lot of fear came up before turning around. So then you have to process that fear. And when they're ready to turn around, only then they turn around. So, you don't instruct clients what to do. You see what they're ready to do. And in your resonance, you see what's happening also. So I feel that somatic therapy work is the therapist also has to be embodied and very grounded in their systems and very aware of their own emotions in the moment while they're working with the client, because they can push the clients to do some techniques mentally, like, oh, if you have fear from behind, you must turn behind and shout. That's not how it can work. Sometimes that can re-traumatize a client. So you want to be very aware of what the client is at. And sometimes the work may be so little. It may just be like, I'm feeling a lot of stress or a lot of burden on my shoulders. Why don't you remove 5% of that burden? Just 5. Maybe make a small movement that will lessen 5% of that load. And that can change a lot. We must have shrugged and pressed our backs 100 times, but when it is done with that emotional energy, because a lot of our muscles have boundary functions, which get stuck in trauma. Our muscles have psychological functions as well, right? Like hands have functions to carry weight, but they also have functions to create space. When we are infiltrated and when we are in the mental energy and in the emotional energy of that, and we create space using our hands or voice or whatever, it can open up possibilities of healing from within. So we would work like that, and after a time, maybe after a few sessions, not immediately, the client said that I don't feel afraid from people following me anymore. I feel much more safer.
Thank you so much. If there are any questions at this point, otherwise I will ask Sadia to lead a practice for us, which will take How much
Maybe
time?
about 15 minutes.
Okay, so 15-20 minutes. But if there are any pressing questions? Okay, so Sadia, would you, yeah, you lead a practice?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Let's do a practice. But we've had a lot of intellectual conversations, so it'll take a bit of time for us to even. We've been using our mind a bit too much right now. So it'll take a while, settle into the system, into the body, and then slowly approach the practice. Shall we do that? Yeah. System. Yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll invite you to just maybe sit in a relaxed but an alert way. So you're aware. Your back is straight. Your legs are grounded. Very importantly, your feet are flat on the ground. And take a moment to just see what it means to relax your body right now. And you can close your eyes when you're ready, or if you feel uneasy to close your eyes, you can leave them open, but your gaze turned downwards. So whatever works for you. And now for a few moments, simply noticing the breath in the chest to move our attention down into the body. Noticing the breath in the belly, the way it moves through the chest and the belly. What does it even feel like moving from a mental space that we were in to now feeling the body? Just noticing. What does that movement feel like? Noticing the breath in the belly, coming down from the head into the body. Noticing the connect with the ground. Taking some time to notice where the ground connects with the feet. And as you create awareness in your feet, noticing how the awareness can come up into the legs. Do you notice the legs better after noticing the feet? Just see what happens right now. Whatever happens is fine. Stay very aware of your own process. Does the awareness keep moving back to the mind? And that's okay if it does. Simply knowing this is happening right now. And simply aware of the connection and support of the ground beneath the feet. Can you just let go a little bit in your legs? Allow them to rest. Allow them to be supported by the ground. And noticing the seat of the body being supported by the chair. And again, just let go, trusting the support. And notice that as you consciously let go, very small muscles in your body start to relax. The thighs might just open up a bit. The muscles in the buttocks may open up a bit. Or for some of us, relaxing can be threatening, can be difficult, which is fine too. Just noticing that. Whatever is the experience, bringing a very kind awareness to that experience. And now noticing the support of the chair on your back. And again, letting go a bit. Taking in the support, aware of the support. If something is uncomfortable, being aware of that. If the body cannot take in support, being aware of that. If it can take in support, being aware of that. Simply noticing what that support feels like. And can you relax your shoulders a little bit, letting go a little bit, tiny muscles in the shoulders. It's okay to just be here now. The experience is simply what it is. Try not to do anything. Try to just be. Try not to fix. Try not to resolve, to open or shut. Simply be. What does it mean to just be right now? You are the witness awareness that knows what's happening in your body. You know whether there is relaxation or not. You know whether there is ease or difficulty. You simply know. You're not engaged in it. Everything that you know about your emotions, your difficulties, who you are, what it is about. For some time, let's just try and leave it on the side and notice, what if whatever happens right now is okay? Whatever. Unpleasant, pleasant, pain, ease, whatever is okay. For some time, we let go of all efforts to fix, resolve anything. Simply recognize that you are the spacious awareness that can notice everything, all the sounds, all the body sensations, the breath, the thoughts. You are a house with an open door. Everything can just come and go. Thoughts, feelings, pain, pleasure, doesn't matter. You just know. You're perfectly aware of what's happening, but you're not caught up. Even if you feel caught up, you're not caught up with feeling caught up. Even that's okay. Everything is perfectly okay right now. Nothing is unwanted. Notice what happens in your body as you allow, as you open. As you open to everything that is happening right now. Notice any movement or expansion or flow or contraction, just whatever it is. Simply notice the body. If thoughts come up that say this is great, even those thoughts are not important. They can come and go. If thoughts come up saying, oh, you're not being embodied, or you can't sit like this, even those are not important. They can also come and go. Right now, everything can come and go. Come, stay, go. No force, no push. How do you feel right now? Just check in with yourself and accept whatever comes up as an answer. Let your body answer. And now, you can take a few deep breaths and we can come to the end of the practice when I play the sound of a bell for you. Okay, as luck would have it, my bell refuses to work, so you can open your eyes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So many things. I asked for just one. Just accept whatever comes up. Abundance. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I'd really like to know what was your experience and the practice. How did it go for you? Any questions that you have, and maybe Tejal can.
Firstly, I really want to thank you, Sadia. I really felt like grace descended. And I thought it would even be nice to just be quiet together in each other's company. But the floor is open.
I'd love to ask a question. I was felt a lot of resistance to just accepting what was arising. It didn't feel right, or it felt like I was being passive or ignoring things. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. What is saying that it's not right? What is saying that it's not right?
I guess it's some judging part of my mind that's saying that, yeah, I should be, yeah.
Right. Is the awareness saying it's not right? Can the awareness say it's not right? No? So there is experience in the awareness. And then the mind comes in to say, I like this experience, I don't like this experience. This is right, this is wrong. This I have to fix, this I have to avoid. And which is fine on a day-to-day life working space. I mean, there are things we have to identify as problems and work on them. But that's not the way we work all the time. That's not required all the time. The problem is the whole system has become conditioned to not accept anything. It makes you feel weak if you're accepting. This is conditioning. Accepting is a strength. Accepting is not a weakness. And accepting doesn't mean you don't have to do anything about it. But right now, in this practice, you're training your mind to accept. When something happens, you pause, you accept it has happened. Then you see what you need to do about it. You go ahead and do something when you need to. You stop when you don't need to. That discrimination, no? In Indian philosophy, it's known as viveka. That discrimination of when I need to act, when I don't, can come only when there is ability to pause and accept whatever is happening right. And to also know that there's a part of my mind that says, I don't want to accept. One has to accept even the fact that the mind says, I don't want to accept. And that's why somewhere in the practice I said, even if the mind is getting caught up, don't get caught up with getting caught up. You can still be aware that that's what my mind is saying. So this is a practice. It's not an understanding only. Right understanding, right practice. Right, you understand it correctly, you practice it correctly. You need both, right? You need the mind to be convinced, because ultimately the mind is only going to help you practice. You need the mind to be convinced. But convinced about what? Convinced about letting it go. Ramana Maharishi said that you need to use the mind, the ego, as a stick that you use to stoke the fire. You put it in the fire to stoke it, and slowly it dissolves in the fire itself. It becomes part of the fire. So you have to convince your mind to practice to let your mind go. But yeah, that's a usual question actually. It comes up all the time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to have this combination of theory and practice and an embodied sense of everything that we spoke about. So it's very helpful. Yeah.
I think everybody is in a good space. So we should just let them be. Would any of you like to share what was the experience for you?
I can. I felt a deep sense of power in knowing that even if for this brief moment, I can let it be. And it really helped also when you said, you know, even if you're caught up, don't get caught up in the caught up. Because I could see there were moments where my mind wanted to, you know, wander away from actually what felt like a deep sense of pleasantness and even bliss, even while there were other underlying, you know, spaces of pain or discomfort. And I felt very deeply held by you and also powerfully held, like really felt empowered that, wow, I can hold this kind of space for myself. And if I did this every day, you know, it would be, I can really feel the deep impact this can have. And the pacing was just so, the pauses was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to add to that actually this is not a practice I do know. In fact, none of my practices get repeated, like it's not something I do point to point or I have a script. I usually have a sense of resonance of people with me. And words literally just come. I mean, of course, there is some experience of teaching, etc. But so all of that came up is actually inspired by your energy at this moment and your presence at this moment. The readiness for you to be in the space makes the practice come up like this. So I'm glad that we are all of us were in this together. It was lovely.
There are two comments from Britta and Veronica, and I'm just checking if they would like to say it themselves, or do you want me to read it? It would be so nice if you please say it also, if you feel like, but I'm always there. Britta, would you like to, or shall I read? Please.
Okay. Yeah, it was so, first, before we started this practice, I had some, I don't know if it's liver pain on the right rib cage, some pain. I also did some acupressure points before, but actually I didn't feel any pain anymore during this. And also, like, it was very helpful that you didn't let us into silence, because I learned Vipassana, and with a Thai tradition, like with a noting, like rising, falling, thinking, hearing. And sometimes last time, because I did it since 2012 and I lost a bit, I think, why should I do it? Because it's not so useful, and I did it a long time. I did more than 10 retreats, and I think it didn't really help me. But now this brought me a bit back to how sensible it is, because at the end I could feel like you know, I had my hand like this and I could feel the energy like a ping pong in the Lao Gong points. I could feel the flowing of the energy, very powerful. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Britta.
Veronica, please, would you like to share?
Yeah, Sadia, it was such a beautiful experience. Thank you very much. And I really wish we could all stay, or can maybe stay longer in this state of equanimity, because it's like instantly a heavenly feeling. And I'm so touched by it. And yeah, I will definitely like to hear your voice more often. Thank you very much. Very beautiful.
You. And the beauty is, see, we didn't really do anything. We actually just made contact with the space within, which is already there. You know? And the beauty is this knowledge that this space is within us all the time, 24/7. It's available. It's there to dip into. You know, the relief that comes from that, the sheer relief that this is available, and the same life situations, the pains, everything exists. But I am not in that. I'm here, and this is me. I think this relief comes from the Advaitic traditions for me, at least.